This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
His name is Zeta. He's kind, gentle, and also a top-secret military weapon. But he's made a decision.
I will not destroy anymore.
Now, with the whole world chasing him,
Please help.
he's on the run with his only friend.
I'm equipped with a built-in credit card. I can generate as much money as I need.
You are so taking me shopping.
The Zeta Project.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 260 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. It's Liam. Liam, we are continuing here in the month of May. Hard to believe already in the year 2023. We're nearly halfway through. But before we hit that halfway point, as we discussed last week, we are spending the month of May in the future, 50 years from now, whenever now is. And that means that we have combined our Batman Beyond and Zeta Project reviews into 1 month, which means we are doing an alternating thing here. This week, we are covering an single episode, perhaps for the last time, a single feature of the Zeta Project. But it fits very well into this month being a combined month because he's not the only hero featured on this week's episode.
That's right, because we are talking of the first of two, I guess, Batman Beyond Zeta Project crossovers. Technically three, I guess, if we count the original episode of Beyond that this all spawned from. But yes, we have the episode Shadows, which features Zeta and Ro once again on the run from the next generation of infiltration units, IU-7. And that actually puts Zeta in the crosshairs of the Batman himself, Terry McGinnis, due to some misunderstandings. So we got a fun crossover to talk about here. One of two they did once the Zeta Project show started. The other one will be covered in a future episode of Batman Beyond that we cover. But yeah, here we are. Let's see if it was worth it.
I was going to say, you were very bold in using the word fun to describe this crossover. So we'll see just if that reflects in our scores and reviews. Liam, before we get into our synopsis and scores for this week's episode, we, of course, will get the official IMDb synopsis for this episode, which originally aired here in the States, at least according to the DCAU wiki, on April the 7th, 2001, meaning we just passed the 22-year anniversary of this episode a little over a month ago at the time of this original airing of this episode. So, but before we get into our synopsis and the IMDb synopsis, it is, of course, as always, brought to you by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower if you are interested in hearing each and every one of our previous 259 plus bonus episode collection and library. It's all featured right there on The Pod Tower. You get every single episode, including past reviews of Batman Beyond and the Zeta Project. If for some reason you wanted to put yourself through the pain of going back and listening to some of those Zeta Project reviews, head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower today.
That's right. So this is the synopsis for the episode Shadows, which was written by Hilary J. Bader with teleplay by Rich Fogel. Man, two people wrote this. Directed by Tim Maltby, with music by Lolita Ritmanis and animation by Coco. And that synopsis reads as such. While waiting for a conference where Dr. Selig is supposed to attend, Zeta is attacked by an infiltration unit they encountered earlier. Batman believes Zeta has returned to his old programming and comes to deal with him.
Oh, the grammar in that one was not very good. Like, the content wise is fine, but the grammar, poor sentence structure. Not gonna get a passing grade on that one. Sorry. D plus for that one. IMDb synopsis.
Yeah, it's not the greatest, but we do with what we can, and I guess we can get into it here. So things open. We're watching like a cartoon gorilla, just running around shooting bananas at other monkeys and stuff. And then we sort of zoom out to reveal that this is a video game screen that Ro is playing and having a lot of fun with, which is still a foreign concept to our robot hero, Zeta.
I don't know. You?
Me, the big banana, the main monkey mauler, the Jimbinator.
But why would you want to kick hairy monkey rump?
'Cause it's fun. Oh, man.
Fun?
Look, Selig isn't due at his genetics conference until tomorrow. What do you want to do? Just cool your circuits back at the airport?
My circuits are at their normal temperature.
Exactly. So why not have some fun? Try it. What have you got to lose?
And as they're sort of discussing things, there's apparently a conference that Dr. Selig's going to be in town for, and they're waiting around for that. He doesn't get into town until the next day. So while we're there, it's revealed that in fact, as seen, there's a little previously on to catch you up, but this.
Thank God, by the way, because I had completely forgotten anything and everything. The only thing that I was upset about in the previously on, no mention of his stockpiles.
Maybe the highlight of this Zeta Project journey so far was
my stockpiles.
Was that guy shouting my stockpiles? But yes, we. As we continue here, we do cut to an airport where we see this infiltration unit Z, this larger, more powerful, more deadly infiltration robot that's supposed to be the next generation that replaces Zeta, has shipped himself, has reactivated and has shipped himself to the town. I guess they're in Gotham. Did they say they're in Gotham?
Nope.
Okay, I didn't think so.
At no point was it established that they were in Gotham.
All right. Well, anyway, maybe I don't know. Maybe I always thought that the Batman Beyond episode, the second Batman Beyond Zeta episode, was like these were just unrelated. But maybe this is supposed to be like part 2 of that. So maybe that makes more sense. But hey, we got to this Zeta episode first, so we're watching this. Anywho, Zeta and Ro are hanging around. Meanwhile, this infiltration unit has shipped himself in a giant bin to we'll just assume it's Gotham City, and frees himself from his captivity and heads on through the airport looking for signs of Zeta, finding some info on him, and picks up his trail, and he's on his way. And meanwhile, we should just preface this, like the first 10 minutes of this episode they're just moving at a glacial pace.
It was such a bizarre choice. Like I get it. Like it is for a different audience. We've talked about that over and over again with the somehow 7 episodes of Zeta that we've covered prior to this one. But it is a different tone than the majority of the other DCAU shows, even I would say significantly different than the static tone, for not necessarily better, for the better, for sure. So, but why did we need 10 minutes of, I'm getting into my critiquing, sorry, but I didn't understand why we needed 10 minutes of hanging around inside an arcade while the robot searches for Zeta, like, when we had a previously on that caught people up to speed on just what this infiltration unit was.
That's right. But yeah, so we continue on there. We have this section, like I said, where the infiltration unit is looking for Zeta. Then we cut back, and Zeta and Ro is still trying to teach Zeta about what fun is. So they see like I guess the future version of a bouncy house. It's like one of those indoor skydiving places, I guess, for kids. So Zeta transforms himself down to kid size and decides he's going to go try this out and try to understand what fun is. And from there, we get the infiltration unit tracking down IU-7. I got to shorten this because it's too many syllables to keep saying infiltration unit. So IU-7 shows up. He tracks Zeta to this mall where he and Ro are hanging out. He sees Ro and actually transforms into Zeta's civilian disguise. I guess figuring that if he just hangs around Ro for long enough, Zeta will eventually come back and he'll be able to attack him. And that does work after a bit of humor from where Ro's just being a real Karen in the cafeteria, just yelling at this minimum wage worker.
Don't ignore me. I'm talking to you. This man needs an attitude-ectomy.
What?
Do your stuff.
Very well.
Quit fooling, Z. Pay him.
Oh.
What's the matter with you?
What do you mean?
You're acting weird. Weirder than usual, even. Hey, Ro! Z?
Target identified.
And so after IU-7 pays for her lunch, the real Zeta shows back up, and the fighting is on. There's a lot of destruction, and of course IU-7 still being disguised as Zeta's civilian identity. It becomes a big plot point here as they have this fight, and there's a lot of destruction. Thankfully, nobody's killed, but in the melee, Ro herself is injured trying to protect Zeta, who is just completely outmatched seemingly by this IU-7 robot. And so Zeta's got to get Ro to a hospital, and then like 10 minutes in, like we're into the second act by now. Batman just shows up. We just cut to the Batcave, and Batman and Bruce Wayne are looking at security footage of Zeta fighting IU-7.
Wayne Powers owns an interest in the mall. I was given this vid as a heads up before it even leaks to the news.
Zeta?
It won't be long before Agent Bennett sees what we're seeing.
Are you sure it's him?
The mall's security system was damaged, but I was able to resolve one more clip.
He swore he wouldn't kill anymore.
It's in his programming. He was built to kill.
And now he's running around loose because I let him go.
Where are you going?
To stop him.
Yep. You know why? Because Wayne Powers owns a piece of the mall. They have a mall that they own. Back to just quickly backtracking here, because I will not remember it when I'm giving my but IU-7's strategy to find Zeta was not to like disguise himself as any random human being and then spy on Ro. It was to disguise himself as Zeta so that as soon as he was spotted by the real Zeta, who's inevitably in that area, Zeta, the actual Zeta, would have the jump on him. Like, makes no sense.
Yeah, this is one of those because the rest of the episode has to come, and we needed Batman and Bruce to think that Zeta was the one causing all of the destruction at the mall.
Correct.
So that Batman and Zeta could fight, probably so that they could put it in an ad on Kids WB.
I mean, your logic does not seem flawed one bit.
Right. It doesn't make it a good narrative, but it is probably the answer here. Is well, we wanted to have a scene where Batman and Zeta fight. So that's how we get it here. We see, like I said, IU-7 footage of IU-7 in his Zeta disguise, seemingly firing on civilians, and then one other shot of Zeta out of camouflage mode. So it seems as though Zeta has gone back to his old ways, and so Terry's going to stop him. We go to the hospital. We know Ro is getting an MRI, and the reason we know it is because Dr. Exposition shows up to be like, this is an MRI. It's a giant magnet. Don't put anything metal or robotic in there. That could really wreak some havoc there. And
that won't come back at any point during the episode.
That's right. So as Ro goes back to her room, Z is kind of he's a little conflicted, and he feels like Ro got hurt because of him, and he's considering kind of just leaving her behind in this hospital and disappearing, and going it alone from here. But before he can really make good on that decision, in comes Batman to throw down.
And he's not just like gonna leave. He has some sort of device that they never explain. Like, is this something that we're supposed to know? Is this like a Men in Black mind wipe thing?
Mm-hmm.
What was this thing that he had in his hand that he was gonna try and like?
Well, it's like his little torch that he uses to fix himself, but then he is kind of pointing it at her.
Right.
Like he's gonna.
He's
like
gonna,
has another
which is
function.
why Batman believes in that moment, in addition to all the other mounting evidence. Thanks to the IU7 thing impersonating and being a big case of mistaken identity, impersonating Zeta. He now sees the Zeta robot hovering over this girl with something in his hand that appears to be a weapon of some kind, which again we don't get a single explanation as to why he was hovering over him in this moment. But it gives the heroes a chance to fight. And an excuse to fight. So Batman and Zeta go at it for a little bit. Batman, we actually see some punches thrown. Like this is a landmark episode, and I told you before we went on the air, but I said I would be grading this on a curve. And believe me, the fact that we actually get some actual physical violence in this episode is a big plus for me. More probably in the visual section than in the plot. But yeah, we get some fisticuffs. But of course, it is not long before. Did we mention the IU7 droid was at the mall when Batman went to investigate?
Yes, we should mention that because that is how IU7 finds.
He overheard Batman and
he was just hanging out at the mall pretending to be a security guard,
knowing that at some point he would get information on Zeta based on just hanging around there.
Whoa. What do you see?
Look at the size of these blast marks. If Zeta's packing this kind of heat, taking him out isn't going to be easy. If I can even find him.
I may have a lead. Rosalie Rowan, the girl Zeta travels with, was admitted to Arlington Mercy 2 hours ago. Maybe she can provide some information.
Arlington Mercy. Got it.
Yeah.
Even though we established earlier he like follows Zeta's footprint, he can like Zeta leaves behind some kind of trail that he can follow with his I don't know, maybe maybe that was damaged in the fight.
We wouldn't know because they didn't tell you.
No. But yes, so Batman is just audibly talking to Bruce in there, and Bruce gives him the location of this hospital where he sees that Ro has been admitted. So yes, Bruce and of course Terry repeats the name of the hospital back out loud and flies off. And then we see IU7 was listening in the whole time.
So IU7, of course, heads to said hospital, and it's just in the midst of Batman and Zeta having their fisticuffs. And it's at that moment Terry puts two and two together and realizes that this IU7 infiltration unit is the one who is responsible for the violence. Doesn't take much convincing. He's like, oh, that's the guy that I should be after, even though it looked like Zeta and he suspected Zeta was the issue. But the IU7 immediately begins attacking Batman. There's additional fisticuffs. They kind of brawl through the hospital into the cafeteria at some point. After some chasing happens as Zeta attempts to run away, there is a moment where the IU7 I keep wanting to call him a droid because he looks like a super battle droid. The IU-7, he has these claws that he pulls out or that grow out of his fingers, and he scrapes it across Zeta's chest. So it kind of does seem like a real threat. Oh yeah, also he has missiles and lasers and things, other weapons that Zeta does not have, of course, as Zeta disposed of all of his weapons at the end of the Batman Beyond episode. But yes, IU-7 continues. There's more fighting that happens and more brawling. Batman initially gets the best of him. He even cuts off one of his hands at one point in the middle of this battle inside the hospital cafeteria. Batman's just a big quip machine during this whole fight. And because this is the Zeta show and not the Batman show, the IU-7 does get the best of Batman, knocking him out with some knockout gas that comes out of his hand at one point. And because of that, the IU-7 chases Zeta down, and wouldn't you know it, they end up at Chekhov's MRI machine, the Ultra MRI machine. Let me be specific here. And of course,
not to cut you off here, but also amongst this melee, Zeta mimics the Gorilla video game that we saw earlier and blinds IU-7 by picking up two bananas still in peel and squeezing them until they shoot out into IU-7's eyes. So they use that to momentarily get away, to set up this big to spring the trap at the end here. That's Chekhov's MRI machine and Chekhov's banana guns.
This is going to come off as completely insincere, but I mean it sincerely. Not sarcastic at all. Thank you for reminding me of that point, because I had completely forgotten, and that is a sincerely pivotal point in the episode. Drawing things all back together, we had to connect the dots. Why did we have this establishing shot with the VR? Well, it's because we could pay it off later when Zeta mimics it and does the same action. So, yep. And so, yes, we end up at the MRI machine, as we mentioned. And of course, Zeta at that point realizes, having heard before that it would destroy anything with metal in it, he gets the idea that this is how he's going to destroy the IU-7, even if it means destroying Zeta in the process. He decides that he's going to sacrifice himself, saying that neither of them will be able to hurt anybody ever again. One of the things that Zeta, I think you mentioned, but as he was getting ready to leave Ro behind, he felt guilty. Ro being injured was his fault, so he is carrying a bit of guilt here. So him sacrificing himself, I guess, would be a way at redeeming that and protecting Ro going forward. So, but at the last second, as Zeta is about to succumb to the MRI machine, Batman throws a batarang in and drags him out of the MRI, leaving just the IU-7 there to be destroyed, I suppose. I don't think maybe he comes back. I don't know. There was no to be continued horror movie villain, so who could know whether or not this guy will reform and pop up someplace else in the future. But he is at least momentarily destroyed into a bajillion pieces, and Batman and Zeta begin to sort of celebrate. Ro comes up eventually, or there's a post-credit scene with Ro and Zeta talking, and Zeta talks about how he's feeling this guilt and that Ro continues to get hurt because of him, and he's going to make the decision that that they're done at this point, that she can leave. And she, of course, objects, says that no, they have plenty of things to do, and it's her decision, and she's willing to risk it. And she's not running off and letting Zeta have all the fun. So at this point, they tell them that they need to continue on, and they exit the building, and that's the end of our story. There was a brief moment where Batman, also I did not mention, apologizes to Zeta for not believing him, and mentions that Agent Bennett is on his way and to collect the IU-7, but that he had firmly denied any involvement in sending the IU-7 after Zeta.
So tall, dark, and ugly is on ice?
Yeah. I spoke to Bennett. He denies ever having sent him after Zeta.
Yeah, he would.
Either way, he's already on his way to collect the pieces.
Then we better not wait for Dr. Selig. We should go.
Zeta, I shouldn't have doubted you.
It was a natural mistake. And thank you.
shall we? What?
Your life was in danger again today because of me. Maybe you should...
Whoa! Time out. Get this through that big fat can up there you call a head. It's my decision and my risk. I can live with it. Besides, I'm not gonna let you run off and have all the fun.
You're having fun? Obviously, I have more processing to do.
Yeah, you work on that.
They decided to, Ro and Zeta decide to leave, missing Dr. Selig, even though they didn't get to see him. Their whole point of being there was to see Dr. Selig, but they decide that it's too risky with Agent Bennett there, so they decide to move on anyway. So I guess we'll find out in the next Zeta episode where they're going to try and find Dr. Selig next.
That's right. And then Zeta teaches us about an egg timer. That's our finale this week.
Fun and educational.
That's right. Edutainment, as they call it. Whew.
All right. So, as you can tell, we are generally not thrilled with the Zeta Project. It just is not our cup of tea. Let me speak for me. It is generally not my cup of tea. And Liam, your scores have reflected the same as we have gone through the first 7 and now 8 episodes of this. As I stated at the top, I was going to grade on a curve here. Plot-wise, if you cut out the first 10 minutes, honestly, if this was a 15-minute or a 12-minute episode, been a lot more stomachable. I don't know if that's a word, but I would have been able to stomach it a lot easier than with the 10 minutes of runtime at the beginning of treading water, simply so that we could establish this video game gaffe that we could happen at the end. It's fun. It's for kids. I get it. You want to establish that. But the whole, I guess you had to also, they felt they had to establish the anti-gravity machine also, because that was how Zeta escaped the IU-7 in their first fight in the middle of the mall. So you had to establish the anti-gravity machine. But why it took 10 minutes to do all that is beyond me, and why you kept cutting back to the IU-7 after having established who the IU-7 was, even catching people up on who he was and why he was out for revenge. We have this whole song and dance of him tracking down Zeta that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, it's like a bit in the airport where he smashes a dude's birdhouse.
I did laugh,
which is funny. But it's not, and again, it's 30. It's that's like 15 seconds of the episode. But yeah,
and he's dressed as Warren McGinnis, but with dyed black hair for some reason.
This is I think this is somebody else. That's a character model that gets used a lot. Like that's I think he was already a character in a Zeta Project episode, and then
I concur. He had like brown hair the last time.
Yes.
Because we definitely pointed that out previously. But I will say the Batman stuff at least made it interesting. Okay, Batman's gonna. It makes sense that Batman believes that he could have gone rogue again. I guess if this comes before whatever ever crossover episode for Batman Beyond, I don't know. We'll have to judge that next week, whether or not it makes sense that he would think that he could possibly still go rogue. They're linked, but they're not really linked episodes, so it's who's to say. But Batman did make it more interesting for a multitude of reasons, voice cast wise, music wise. I don't know that he added all of that much to the plot. It didn't seem like at any point that he was actually, like, you knew that he was going to figure out, he's Batman, he's going to figure out the IU-7 is to blame, that it's not really Zeta. And because it was such a truncated time frame to kind of work that out, you use the first 10 minutes in the mall with all that chicanery, and then you have 12 minutes left to introduce Batman, have him think that Zeta's the bad guy, have Zeta feel guilty, Zeta try to leave, Batman falsely accuse him, Batman then find out that the IU-7 is actually to blame, then fight the IU-7, then Zeta rescue Batman, and then defeat the IU-7. Like, it's so much in that last 5 to 7 minutes that could have been stretched out probably and would have made the entire episode a whole lot more interesting. I'm grading on a curve here. I think that at least there was some violence. At least there was some fighting that occurred. There's a lot of action in the episode once you get past that first 8 minutes or so where they're just kind of standing around and, you know, searching for Zeta and all that stuff. There's fighting that happens almost nonstop from there to the end. So at least that was interesting. So I ended up on a 6 out of 10 for plot.
Yeah, I just went 1 point lower. I went 5 out of 10. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with this episode. It is funny though, because I think a thing we have routinely, if nothing else, one of the things we've routinely praised is the Z and Ro relationship and how, you know, and how fun their dynamic is. And you kind of sideline her and like the whole idea of like Zeta feeling guilty for endangering her and all of that and considering leaving her behind, like that feels like it should be like a major plot point for like a season, right? Like, and instead it's raised in this episode, and then she just kind of squashes it and he goes okay at the end. So I guess we'll have to see. Maybe it'll resurface later on in the series again, but it just feels like that idea of, you know, this nearly indestructible robot on the run from the government kind of having this crisis of conscience about letting this teenager stick around with him feels like it should be maybe a bigger deal, and instead here it's kind of a C plot
right
beyond the IU7 stuff and the Batman stuff. So like I said, I think it's fun to see Batman and Zeta together. It's fun to, you know, to have that punch up, like you said. The action has a little bit more oomph to it because there's, you know, there's actual like peril to it. It's not just like you know, it's a little bit more exciting, even with all of the puns and everything that we'll talk about. But yeah, overall I think it's fine. Like I said, 5 out of 10. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's great. Maybe you would hope for, like I said, I think I either wish there was more in the direction of maybe giving Ro a little bit more to do in this episode, or, you know, I don't know, I guess, or even more for Batman to do, because he kind of just shows up, punches Zeta, then punches IU7, and then he's like, sorry, and leaves.
Right.
So he doesn't get a lot to do. And again, you only got 22 minutes, and, you know, 2 minutes of that is your infotainment and your credits and intro. So, you know, take that out, you got 20 minutes left to actually tell your story. So maybe it's a little too much to ask, but yeah, for it being a big crossover episode between shows, world's finest it is not, but it is a perfectly fine, you know, 20 some minutes you know, of DCAU crossover.
Yeah,
you know, it's fine.
yeah. I think that's the best thing that we can say, and from there we will move on. And we will move on, Liam, with our next category, which of course is going to be visuals and animation. So we have Coco. Is it just Coco or Coco?
Just Coco this week.
Just Coco this week. All right, Coco. Coco responsible for our animation this week, as you mentioned at the top. This one is directed by Tim Maltby. Maybe
Maltby, yes, I believe.
Maltby. So Tim Maltby responsible for our direction this week. I will say I kind of cheated. I found out I was cheating. There is a AI apparently HD upscaled version of these episodes that I didn't realize aren't available to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
I think our friends at Watchtower Database shared the link during their Zeta month. So I had it saved and I went back and watched this, and compared to like some of the other lower definition episodes that I have watched, it's night and day on how I enjoy them as far as visually is concerned.
It's not actively putting strain on your eyeballs to watch the show. It's
correct.
It's more enjoyable for you.
In the 380p of 1990 2001 or whatever it was, 01. So it makes a world of difference. So for those people that are clamoring for a re-release of this show, it can sit behind every other cartoon since the beginning of time, in my opinion. But like, hey, if you want this show, watching it in HD makes a big difference. So,
well, I for one would never betray the wonderful Warner Brothers Corporation in that way. I love big corporations and their products that they release to us. And I would only ever pay for them. And I'm not going to ask you to DM me that link after we're done here. I'm not going to do that. I would never do that because I love corporations. I love brands.
yes.
And I love paying money to watch the Zeta Project. I love doing that as well.
I mean, anyone who knows you knows that that's absolutely true. And your love for brands, just extends beyond your love for humanity.
Absolutely.
Your fellow man. Brands
corporations are people too.
That's right. To unbridled capitalism, I believe, is one of my favorite quotes. So, but back to the topic at hand, the animation visuals here. The HD does make it a lot different and a lot more enjoyable. So this one was crisp and enjoyable for me, at least. But let's start with you, Liam, as you watched in your peasant 480p or whatever it is. What did you have as far as notes were concerned for animation and visuals?
I think the most fun stuff, obviously, other than we can get to the big fights, the big Batman fight at the end of the episode in a minute here. There's a lot of we've talked about this before with Zeta, but the way they show the robot body physically change before it like puts the hologram on, I always think is nice. And they did that again here with IU7s, and he's like this giant Godzilla looking thing. So watching him like shrink down into normal person size, like I was impressed with that. There's a lot of shots of like when IU7 is in the Zeta civilian disguise and he starts using his weapons where just his arm turns and they have this kind of like flickering light all around going up to like his elbow, and then you see the robot arms out with shooting the bombs or whatever. I think that's a really cool sequence. And and Zeta kind of having to spring into action. As you mentioned, there's more like direct physical violence in this. Like one point IU7 like grows these claws and starts like slashing up Zeta's chest and kind of goes for the face there. So like there's definitely they definitely take more advantage of this being a robot on robot violence. They definitely get to do some stuff I think they wouldn't get to do otherwise. So yeah, I think a lot of the way they use the transformations in this episode are pretty good. There's some fun, as you mentioned, like the Predator vision, the Terminator vision that we see IU7 using when he's walking through the airport, I think is pretty neat as well. And then, like I said, we can get to the Batman stuff in a minute here, but yeah, I think it's overall, I think that stuff, the way they went in and out of the transformations and kind of the in-between transformations rather than it just being the robot form or the civilian form, I thought was pretty nifty as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the art, I mean the animation and visuals were the strongest point of the episode. I do like the IU7. We talked about it in the first episode that he appeared in, but I do like the design. It's a little bit more, it kind of reminds me of the villain in the RoboCop movie. It's mixed with a battle droid, like from a super battle droid from Star Wars. There's just something different about it. He's big and hulking. Obviously Zeta is the skinny, thin, pencil thin robot looking fella, but the muscled up version of the IU7 definitely makes him feel certainly a little bit more intimidating than Zeta. So not to mention the weapons that they gave him. Specifically, there's actually one scene that I really loved the visuals of, and that's the scene where Batman cuts his hand off. I think he throws a batarang, an exploding batarang at his hand. And then the IU7 catches it. It blows his hand off completely. They show the hand just sort of hanging off. It drops into this bowl of chili or something like that because they're fighting in the cafeteria at that time in the hospital. The hand drops in it, and then he just kind of stares at it for a second, and then a new hand pops out. And then they do this shot where it kind of, you see the hand. It's from the facing view of the character. It reminded me, actually, it's the I don't know if it was one of the covers of the actual issues or if it's just the trade paperback. But there's a shot from the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, the original one in the comics, a George Perez piece of Thanos holding the Infinity Gauntlet in front of his face. He's clenching his fist. And I don't know if it was directly ripped from that or inspired by that, but it gave me those vibes. And we know how the writers and directors tend to give shout outs to some of their favorite artists throughout here. So I'd be interested to hear if that was an intentional shout out, if there's maybe another shot that was based on, but it felt too specific and for it to be a coincidence that it wasn't inspired by something else. But just a really neat shot there as he clenches his fist and holds it in front of his face before proceeding to go on the attack again. But there's a scene in there's a part of that same scene where Batman gets thrown into this poor lady's hospital room, and she's scared and she bangs him in the head with a bedpan.
Yes, it's a very funny bit.
The violence, like I said, the violence in this episode was turned way up. I don't remember seeing Zeta getting hit in the head with a bedpan before. Like they took all the gloves off for this one. But I liked Batman. Also, his way of trying to kill Zeta is to get the I was gonna mess that up. The defibrillator out and shock Zeta, and his eyes start turning red, which is just very, very haunting. Like you don't want to see Zeta's eyes red. He looks very evil. I think I did wonder in that opening scene, the gorilla game. The monkey or chimpanzees, I thought, at least initially, I was like, perhaps those chimpanzees looked a little bit, at least one of them looked a little bit like Gleek from the Super Friends.
So they're blue, right?
Yep. He's blue. They could have been more overt with it if they wanted to, but there's definitely a blue chimpanzee that has the same sort of DNA as Gleek from the Super Friends. True Super Friends fans know who I'm talking about. The mascot of the Wonder Twin team. But we would also be remiss not to mention there is a cameo from the Tiny Toon Adventures book. I think the Pizza Boy is holding a Tiny Toons Adventures. Of course, Tiny Toons, Bruce Timm famously worked on Tiny Toons. Did Alan Burnett work on that as well?
I don't know if Alan Burnett did, but I know, Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski were working on that show when BTAS went into production.
So those two worked on it, and then of course it has made several cameos before. There was a Tiny Toons book in a couple of the Joker episodes, and then later in Nothing to Fear also, I believe there's a cameo from that one as well. So some good DCAU continuity there. We can't have a police scene no matter what show it is without the hapless SWAT team showing up. They weren't as big of buffoons this time as they typically are. No launching explosives into crowded rooms or anything like that, as we typically would expect from them. But
that's why I wasn't sure if they were in Gotham, because these aren't the white and black Gotham cops that we see. They're in like green and gold uniforms, and then there's like some sort of generic brown like security uniforms, the one that Zeta turns into.
It also doesn't look like Gotham, so it's is this a mall that Wayne Powers has a stake in that's outside of Gotham, perhaps just outside of Gotham? We may never know. Who knows? I guess we'll find out.
It's in Bloodhaven.
Yeah, there we go. We'll say it's in Bloodhaven until proven different next week when we watch the other crossover episode. But some good animation here. I enjoyed it. Like I said, the HD certainly helped. But I thought Batman looked on model. I thought Bruce looked. There was like some slight differences. He was a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more in the Zeta Project style. But I thought Bruce even adapted well to that Zeta style, and everybody looked pretty on model. Otherwise, Batman moves well. There's a weird moment where he's in the fight with the IU-7. And like the IU-7 throws him into the air, and Batman just sort of hovers there. Like he doesn't shoot the rockets out of his boots, and doesn't have his wings extended. He's just kind of hanging around, which I thought was a weird It was just like, did somebody forget to draw wings on him? Did they forget that he can't just like fly? Is this one of those things where they made Batman fly again? I don't know. But overall, I ended up with a pretty strong, especially for Zeta, 7 out of 10 for this week's episode. What about you?
Yeah, I actually went with the exact same score. I think those fights with IU7 and the inclusion of Batman with all his gadget. Yet another rebreather, by the way. We were just talking about this, I believe, last week about all the different ways that Terry has to protect himself from gas or to breathe underwater, and we had yet another one here that he briefly uses. But yes, I think there's a lot of fun visually, and just getting Batman. It is strange because they do tweak. It does feel like they tweak Bruce and maybe not Batman as much. But they both fit into the show, considering how different this show feels visually to Beyond. I thought I was kind of impressed by how well that worked.
Yeah, it was adapted really well. It didn't seem like a fish out of water. The characters maintained their integrity while still looking faithful to they kind of have those thick border lines. A lot of the characters have these thick border lines, and they kept those when it came to Bruce. Batman is not as noticeable because he's a stark black costume, so it didn't look quite as off-putting. But yeah, I mean, Coco obviously having worked on both of these shows, was probably familiar with. You had people that were familiar with animating these, so adapting them slightly to kind of fit a little bit better into this more cartoony style that Zeta did, guess wasn't that difficult for them. So kudos to them. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we had the great Lolita Ritmanis responsible this week for the music. So as I mentioned at the top, there was a difference in our music here. We had our standard Zeta fare for about for the first 12 minutes or so of sort of synthesizer driven kind of weird sounds plunking around on the keyboard with the quirky intros and outros and all of that we've come to expect from these episodes. But as soon as the future Dark Knight shows up, we get more of the traditional Beyond theme kind of mixed in and melded in. That kind of starts immediately as soon as we're introduced to the future Dark Knight, and then as continues all the way up through the fight between Zeta and Batman, and then as Batman supports Zeta in the fight against the IU7, we get more of that there as well, and then we get sort of back to the main streamlined Zeta soundtrack at the end in the conversation between Zeta and Ro as they're going to continue on their adventures there. But I thought this was an improvement. It kind of broke things up and made things stand out a little bit. They made the Beyond theme. The Beyond theme, I think, briefly does sort of play. It may not be straight through, but the notes are there. Like you can hear the DNA of the notes there. So I thought the music was an improvement and was at least noticeably different with the inclusion of the more Beyond sounds. So I went with a 7 out of 10 for my music. What about you?
Nice. Yeah, I'm again just 1 point lower at 6 out of 10. Yeah. Only other note I would mention is I do like, even though it's before Batman comes into the episode and we get more of that traditional Beyond music, it's a very kind of like synthy track that plays over that first IU7 versus Zeta fight in the mall, but it has like a really good sharp tempo to it, and the way it kind of pairs rhythmically with where Zeta's kind of trapped under some debris and IU7's kind of marching methodically towards him, and the way the music kind of kept on beat with him. I appreciated that as well. So we've talked about that before, how the music can kind of rhythmically match what's happening on the screen there and in some of these action beats. So I appreciated that as well. So yeah, a solid outing from Miss Ritmanis, not surprisingly.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our final category of the day, which of course is going to be our list of voice actors and actresses. We have a pretty small cast, I guess, because we have one particular cast member doing double duty, and that's both for our protagonist and antagonist. And then, of course, we have a couple of notable guest stars with our visitors from Gotham. Let's go ahead and talk about this week's voice cast.
That's right. So just briefly, we'll touch on some of the more minor actors who were in there. We have once again voicing the. I didn't realize we were going to have like a regular. Whenever Zeta turns into the kid, we once again have Eli Marenthal playing him, who of course later on he voices Robin in Mystery of the Batwoman, and was of course the voice of Hogarth in the Iron Giant. So always worth shouting him out. And then, yeah, we have our guest stars of this episode, the main stars of our other show we talk about in future months. But we do briefly have Kevin Conroy as Bruce Wayne, and Will Friedle as Batman. And yeah, like they don't, like I said, a lot of Terry's dialogue is quips, and a lot of Bruce's dialogue is exposition. But yeah, it's like I said, it's fun to get them in the mix with our main Zeta actors, and yeah, I think there is some fun. Like he's got like his pun about when the cafeteria blows up, and he's like he's working on his tight five for the Chuckle Hut about hospital food or whatever. I kind of rolled my eyes at that one, but no, it was fun. It's fun, like I said, just to have them in here, and it feels like you bring the show. And as a fun trivia note, I saw this in the DCAU wiki. This with Kevin Conroy appearing in this episode, that makes him the only actor to have appeared in every single DCAU television series. So there's a fun bit of trivia for you, or at least the only actor to play the same character in every one.
Sure.
Right.
Sure
Bruce Timm and Andrea Romano have probably done a voice in every show too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if there was going to be one, it would be the one, right? It would be Kevin Conroy. So yeah, not much to write home about his performance, other than it sounds like his future Bruce. So great performance, great job there. And as you mentioned, Will Friedle relegated mainly to quipping and reacting to Zeta, and eventually apologizing to Zeta, but didn't sound like any different. It felt like right at home, like we were watching. Well, maybe not watching, listening to a Batman Beyond episode by the time he joins in. So yeah, nothing wrong with either of their performances.
Absolutely. And then we have our main actors, Julie Nathanson as Ro. Like we said, she's kind of sidelined for this episode. And like we said in plot, I think we could have used a little bit more of her, just because of the content of the story of Zeta, considering leaving and going it alone to protect her. And of course, then we have Diedrich Bader, the Great, as both Zeta and as IU7 here, pulling double duty. And I do love that. Yeah, we get like he has this real, it's very dry, but
it's almost his Batman voice.
It really is. It's very it doesn't quite break the way his Batman, but it's that same sort of like, it's definitely going in that same direction.
Yep, for sure.
And even though he doesn't, the IU7 doesn't really show any emotion, it still feels very sinister. So, again, newsflash, Diedrich Bader's a great voice actor, but him getting to play both roles and how they bounce off of each other, and how they bounce off of Miss Nathanson, and of course Will Friedle as well, is a lot of fun in this one.
Yeah, I think we talked about it the last episode that he was playing both Zeta and the IU7, but and we talk about it. I try and talk about it each and every time that we have an episode where somebody plays double duty. Voice acting in and of itself is an incredibly skilled profession. There are people you could try and do it, but and there are people that do it that maybe aren't very skilled. But the people that are skilled, and the people that are known for their voice acting, they're uniquely gifted. So a lot of times I think we would take that for granted, like, oh yeah, they're a voice actor, they are, they should be able to do this. But being able to differentiate, you're not just playing the same character in an episode, you're playing a variance of that character. So you have to differentiate. It has to sound similar but different on its own. There are aspects of it, as we've already pointed out here. Zeta is naive. He's kind of just peaceful, chill, kind. All of that kind of fills in the Zeta personality. And then this IU7 is emotionless, cold, heartless, mean, evil, intimidating, like all of these things. And all that has to be communicated through a slight variation on the voice, because they wanted it to sound similar, because this is just like the nenext generation of the Zeta robot, right? So all of that is being fed likely to Mr. Bader. And it's like, all right, come up with something different, or perhaps with the great Andrea Romano's direction of like, hey, try this instead of this, or what have you. But either way, at the end of the day, the performance that Mr. Bader puts out is his, and we certainly applaud him for the ability to pull double duty in an episode like this and do so effectively. Yeah, he's unsurprisingly really great. And I would say, I guess with the exception of the crossover episode in Batman Beyond, these two episodes might be the only two DCAU episodes where we technically have three different Batmen in it, right?
Ooh, good call. Yeah, that's a fun trivia note. I guess it's this, and yeah, as far as DCAU episodes, there is the Brave and the Bullet episode we've previously touched on, which featured Mr. Conroy, Mr. Bader, and Adam West. But I have to think this is the only actual mainline DCAU episode that does.
Yeah. So there you have it. And obviously Mr. Bader would play him in the future after the Zeta project was wrapped up. But yeah, it was really cool to hear all three of them there together and interacting. And unsurprisingly, this cast, even with Miss Nathanson in a small but important role as you mentioned, the very perturbed Karen-like character throwing the pizza back at the guy, and then her sharing with Zeta at the end that she's willingly putting herself in danger, that she's not going to let Zeta carry that burden. I thought she had a solid little role as well. So for all those reasons, I ended up giving voice acting a very strong, grading on a curve, 9 out of 10. What about you?
Wow. Yeah, I gave it an 8 out of 10. So again, not too far off. But yeah, I think it's fun, and as you mentioned, there's a little bit of like a history to it. So there's definitely a lot of fun having again Mr. Bader pull dual roles, and then getting Kevin Conroy and Will Friedle in there to mix it up with the rest of the main cast is a lot of fun as well.
Absolutely. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to the end of our episode here. So let's total up our scores, totaling everything up here. Mark this one down, folks, because I would pretty much guarantee this is going to be the highest score probably from either of us going forward in the history of Zeta Project reviews. I end up with a 29 out of 40 for this episode, somehow, some way. What about you, Liam?
Yeah, and I think we were just maybe 1 point off in a few of our categories here. So I ended up with a not quite as high 26 out of 40, but still probably, if I had to guess, my highest Zeta review to date as well.
To date, and likely going forward. I'm gonna make that bold prediction here. Correct me in the future, 50 years from now, once we've back on all these, whenever now is. But rewatchability, Liam, I'd say based on the crossover aspect, I think this is unfortunately one that we would have to say. So continuity wise, IU7 does return. So we've learned IU7 does indeed return. Somehow IU7 returns, to borrow a colloquialism. I don't know whether or not there's any when we cover the Beyond and Zeta crossover, if there's any bleeding from this episode into that, and we will tackle that when we come to it. But I think based on the fact that IU7 returns, it's important to the Zeta Project as a whole. So if you're watching through Plus, hey, if you're going to pick a Zeta Project episode to watch, pick the most entertaining one, right? Which has a cameo from Batman. So I'd say one and a thumbs up.
Yeah. I think this gets approaching 2 thumbs up for the crossover, for the recurring villain, and then for it just being a solid, fun time watching this episode. I think it's you can approach it. You can get it approaching 2 thumbs up for rewatchability.
You know, you started the episode by saying fun, that this was a fun crossover. You ended after all of us talking about this. You ended it with fun. So I guess we have to say, you could put this on the poster. Fun.
Yes, fun
Liam.
and fine.
Fun and fine, Liam. All right, Liam. Well, let's wrap things up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, we would love your support for the podcast, and there are a myriad of ways for you to do so. The first ways that you can do so is check out the show notes of the podcast. There are 2 links there directly. There's one to support us directly monetarily if you want to buy us a coffee. There's also a link there if you want to purchase like a shirt, hat, mug, piece of merchandise. You can head over and check out those links if you want to support the podcast monetarily. If you want to support the podcast in one of our free ways, which we totally understand in this economy, absolutely. There's a lot of free ways to support us, and we value them just as much, if not more. If you give us a follow on social media at DCAU Review on Twitter and on Instagram, interact with us on Twitter. Liam runs our Twitter page, as we talk about, and it's, we get to interact and see people's thoughts and hear people's thoughts. And Liam's tweeting things throughout the week. I'm interacting and sharing things from my own Twitter, and it's a lot of fun. So we encourage you, if you're on Twitter, you're still there, and you want to talk about something other than politics or world events, and you just want to talk about cartoons and what's going on in the comic book world, tweet us at DCAU Review. You can also, of course, always slide into those DMs on Instagram and talk to us there. Also, if you want to chat about anything or comment on our posts on Instagram at DCAU Review as well. Lastly, maybe the most important way to support us is to give us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify. I think it's just Spotify and Apple that allow you to rate it. But hey, if you're listening on one of those other ancillary ones and they allow you to leave a rating, please, by all means, give us a 5-star review. If it lets you leave a paragraph like it does on Apple Podcasts, please, we would greatly appreciate you letting the other people that might stumble upon the pod know what it is you enjoy about the podcast, what you like, what you don't like, maybe. Share that in that little blurb there. That helps us out and may allow somebody else to discover the pod as well. Liam, as we mentioned several times, we are continuing here in our future reviews. Gotta get a better name for that. I don't know. We're back to the future this whole month, Liam, and we are continuing next week with our next episode of Batman Beyond.
That's right. We got I think a pretty memorable one. We got a returning villain next week in the episode Inkling, which not only deals with the return of Ink, but delves into her backstory a little bit and some of her past as well. So looking forward to diving into that one. It's a pretty fun, memorable one from my recollection anyway. So we'll be interested to see if it holds up under our modern, more critical eyes next week.
Absolutely, and don't forget, dropping this weekend. Also, if you're listening on the original drop date of this episode, is our review of the next Batman The Adventures Continue comic book. We are in season 3, and we're going to be talking about issue 5, so that will be dropping also in your podcast feeds this weekend. But until our next episode, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.